Well, hello, welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show. My name is Jeremy Stalmacher. I am the Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation and excited about our show today, which we'll get to in just a minute. If you are watching, though, you're watching on YouTube and you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and do that right now. You don't need to wait till the end. You're going to love the show. So just do it right now. Hit the notification bell. That will let you know when new content comes online. And I'll probably mention this at the end of the show, but on our channel, there's a lot of content that we push out. Our show every Friday morning at 10 goes live, and you can check that out. But all week long, we're pushing new content, and hitting that notification bell will let you know that it's there. And that'd be awesome. Go ahead and comment if you have something to say, and that would be great. If you're listening on either the podcast or on Mojo 50, again, you can jump over to the YouTube channel, check out the other things we have there, and subscribe. And that would be awesome. But looking forward to a good show today. And this is kind of like round 2 of our show today.
Yeah,
so I'm here with the gentlemen of the War Stories podcast, and I'll introduce them in just a second. But we're, I think, going into hour 2 of our conversation together.
Right,
Just so much to say.
Yeah.
Right. So War Stories podcast, and I'll let you guys plug your show in a little while. But great podcast, but we just did an interview. So you guys interviewed me.
Yes.
And then we just turned the table around, and now we're doing this.
Yeah, we started by contacting you and asking if we could interview you, and you said, well, only if we
only if we can interview you. So
interview the interviewer.
We're going to rewind the conversation. So if you want to hear the same conversation from the other side, go over to their channel,
exactly.
And that'd be awesome. But
we only recorded one.
and we just changed the background. But Tom Gandy and John Zibley,
you got it.
Yeah. All right. Tom and John are here, and they do run the War Stories podcast. And I'll let them tell you about that. But one of the things that we talk about often on our show is the need for community, and how often what veterans and those in the first responder community are struggling with is not combat-related trauma, although sometimes that is a factor. Often, I would say it exacerbates existing problems. It brings to the surface existing problems. But those problems often are held at bay when you're in the community of people. You know, Tom, you're a police officer. John, you're a police officer now, but also served in the military. When you're in that community, a lot of those issues kind of stay at bay because you have other people that you can relate to and connect with.
Right.
And then you separate out of that community, and man, so many of those problems come to the surface. And one of the things we like to do is create a community, and that's what we do at Mighty Oaks, and we have opportunities to connect with other folks who have served. But in a big way, that's what your podcast is doing. It's creating a community, maybe a virtual community to some extent, but it's a place where people can connect. So tell us first about yourselves, and then we'll talk about your podcast and some of the opportunities to connect with folks in a meaningful way. But Tom, why don't you tell us your story? You served as a police officer. Now you're doing something completely different.
Yeah, right.
But tell us kind of where you started and how you got into police work and what you're doing now.
So my kind of backstory is grew up in a Christian home, grew up in Southern California, and had a father who's Los Angeles Police Department for 25 years, and my grandfather worked in the movie business. You know, it was kind of a weird, flip-flop. And so when I started working in the movie business, but then my daughter was born. I wanted do something that was meaningful but also steady and stable. Yeah. So I became a police officer. My dad said, anywhere. He said, I work for LAPD, anywhere but LAPD. And I said, okay. So I went up to the Central Coast of California, worked for the Tascadero Police Department. Spent just over 10 years there, ended up medically retiring, worked a lot of assignments, worked as an instructor for the state in officer safety and tactics, arrest and control, undercover narcotics investigation, being on we were on our own tactical team, we'd serve our own warrants and stuff like that. Then through some, turns of life and, the fastest way to make God laugh is tell him what your plans are. Right. So I ended up medically retiring. That process took about a year and a half. Yeah. And during that process, I'm 35 years old at the time, and I went, what now? Yeah, I was going to do this till I was 50 or 55, and then, watch the kids from the porch. Watch the grandkids from the porch. So my wife said, what's the only other thing you ever loved? And I said, well, I like making movies, and the kids are older now, and I had my police retirement. So she said, well, let's go do that. My her parents lived down in Los Angeles area, so that's what we did. I moved and got back into that and ended up doing something, kind of providing technical whatever. But
how do you just get into that? You said it was like it was such an easy thing. Like I just walked in and
it's kind of funny.
What does that look
when
like?
you grow up in Los Angeles, you end up inevitably, especially in Santa Clarita, where I first grew up, you end up inevitably meeting people.
You're connected to people,
are connected in some way, grips or drivers or camera guys or special effects
Which
guys.
grip, by the way, is my favorite thing in this.
There you go.
Credits.
It's
the key grip, even.
Right.
I don't know what any of these people do.
Best boy.
I don't know what any of these people do, but I love
After the camera turns
titles.
off, I'll tell you, they're not very interesting. To them. But so I ended up through some mutual friends, kind of saying, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I want to get back into it. And somebody had mentioned, being a technical advisor for cop shows or being an armor and managing, the firearms and stuff like that. So I started putting my resume out there, and I ended up through friends of friends getting put out to a company that does military, police, tactical firearms, props, all that kind of stuff. And they said, wait, you understand how the movie business works, but you also know all of the military and tactical gear.
Sure.
You're like a unicorn, and we would love to have you on staff. So I ended up working there. That's where I kind of have my day job. But for me, kind of, there was something missing. What I did mattered before, and had an impact. And while movies are cool, and I love making them, didn't quite have that same impact. And I was really struggling talking to my wife. I just doesn't matter, it's not as impactful, it doesn't matter. And so I ended up through that, we struggled, talked about it, and I said, I'm going to start a podcast. And that kind of grew as we had these guys around a round table. I met John, and having a table full of cops and veterans and firefighters and stuff like that, inevitably the stories start flying. Yeah, right. So as the stories started flying, people kind of said, you should do that. And so that's...
Do that meaning?
We kind of changed the format, and it was one, just guys sitting around talking, and we kind of turned it into this other thing.
People telling stories.
But when we did it, I sat down with John because we had gotten to know each other through that, and so I trusted him to be a good sounding board, a good, co-host, a good second, and I said I don't want it to be, just sitting around talking crap. I want it to mean something. Right. So we kind of planned out what our goal was for it, and
I knew we learned brainstorming in school.
Yeah, right.
I knew we did. Exactly. It all came together.
Finally.
So I think our first guest, his father was a police officer too. He was our first. Well, your story we aired first, but he was our first actual guest.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So the first 3 episodes were his dad, him, and me sharing our stories, because we were like, okay, we're gonna we'll put up or shut up, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
We shared our stories, and
cool.
People started sharing their stories.
It's always interesting to me. I'm cutting you off every time you say something, but
it's your show.
I can't remember which show we're on right now, because this is the second show. But on your show, an hour ago, I think we talked about this, but it's funny how you can live a whole life, but the thing that sticks out to you the most are those moments of service, right?
Right.
You see a 90-year-old guy at the vet hospital who's wearing his hat from World War I or World War I. That's all the things he did in his life. Raised a family, had a job, maybe built something important. The thing that he really thinks about and remembers the most is that time of service. Sure.
Because I think that's when we're at our best. That's when you're doing stuff for yourself. You're not you may be doing your best for yourself, but we are at our best as people when we're doing things for other people. We get it's the most fulfilling and the most rewarding, and
which is why we like to tell the stories again.
Right. And so when I retired, and one of the things I sat down with John, when I missed the community, I lost a lot of touch with a lot of people, and it's some of them, through deliberate reasons that they didn't want to talk to me.
It's good to lose touch with some people.
Right. Some of them you just let go and you realize it's probably better that way.
Right.
But others, just by the sheer fact that they're leading different lives now.
Yeah.
And so you missed that, and I missed the connection with it. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe this is, if there's other people feeling that way, or if I feel that way, there's other people feeling that way. So if we share these stories and we put them out there, maybe the vet who, is missing his unit can listen and hear, the same kind of talk that he would hear when he was with his unit, and not feel so alone, or can reconnect with it. Or maybe he wants to come, and we'll invite everybody. Hey, you want to just DM us if you want to share a story and you serve cop, firefighter, whatever. We'd be more than happy to talk to you, just because that's part of this community. But the unintended consequence we've been seeing is we've gotten emails from family members and from civilians who have said, I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know, we had a gal, she emailed his father because she kind of knows him on the periphery, and she had just said, thank you, because my husband's been a police officer for over 15 years, and he's never shared anything about what he goes through at work with us.
Yeah.
And I finally understand what he goes through because of what you guys have shared, and he won't share with me. So it was like, oh, wait, so this is actually helping people?
Yeah.
It's not just us, you know.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think in previous wars, there was the veterans who would come home and they'd go hang out at the local bar or the local, you know, whatever club or whatever, and they'd tell stories and encourage each other that way. We've lost a lot of that, but what we've replaced it with is this.
Right.
It's social media, it's podcasting, it's opportunities to do the same thing but in a different format. But what it has done, which the other didn't, is it's connected with family members and wives who are just struggling to understand. And you know, I told you guys my story a little bit, but you know, my wife, we were married when we met when we were 18. We were married when we were 21 or 22. Which, if she was listening, she'd be mad I didn't know the actual age that we were, but she won't listen, so it'll be fine.
I was gonna say, like my wife, she's not.
It'll be fine.
I hear you talk all the time.
She won't be, so it'll be fine. But married young, and you know, then I went to Iraq, and I came back from Iraq, and then she had no way to understand what I was going through. But hearing stories from other people has helped a lot over the years, and so it's a really interesting format or kind of platform that we have now.
Yeah, it's opened up a lot of doors. I always tell people that listen, if they're not involved, they can be a fly on the wall, and they can hear, you know. And we talked about this, and John and I have talked about this. When you have seen trauma, death, bodies, or you know, the nurses that work in the ER and seen horrible injuries or all these kinds of things, you do develop a certain sense of humor and an armor towards it and all this sort of stuff.
Sure.
But you also develop this sense of isolation because when you tell those things to other people, there can be a little bit.
They don't get it. Yeah. Right.
And so we talk about it to ourselves. We don't talk about it to them because we don't want to pollute them. I mean, that's a lot of guys. I don't want to come home and tell my wife that stuff because I don't want to pollute her.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to have this in my soul.
Right.
I don't want her to have to have it either.
Right.
But there's this service where there's got to be a middle ground, and so hopefully this gives people that ability to hear those stories without having to have that weird, awkward eye contact. Oh, I want to be out of this conversation. I wasn't expecting to have to hear this stuff.
Have you guys heard from? And John, I'm going to get your story.
Yeah.
Just since we're talking about it, have you guys heard from maybe civilians or those who haven't served in the military or in the first responder community that have listened to your podcasts and have said, that really helped me to hear that because I was abused as a child, or I'm going through a relationship thing, or my kids are going crazy, or whatever the case. Mm-hmm. Have you found some connection with folks outside of the intended community that have found some help and maybe?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we actually ended up having him on the show later on, but prior to, he had listened to a few of our episodes, mm-hmm. and he was he is a friend of mine, and he had hit me up and he had listened to, I think, all three of ours, mm-hmm. maybe another one, and finally he just reached out to me and was like, dude, I need somebody. I need somebody. No, well, first of all, I've been here, I've known you since high school, so you could have hit me up anytime you wanted to. But if that opened the door for him and that made him feel comfortable enough, well, guess what? Then that's fine. So he got the help he needed. We actually hang out a lot more now. And he's on a better track with his wife and kids.
Yeah, wow.
And we had so somebody that knows his father in the real world had known that he was on our show and shared it. He's an engineer.
Right.
And anybody that knows an engineer knows that's a whole different breed in of itself. They're their own community, right?
Right. They know math.
It takes special people to be engineers. And I'm not one of them. I am not.
Right.
But he, I guess he had never really had I don't want to say a great opinion of law enforcement, but it was kind of dismissive. Is what it sounded like from what was described to me. And as a result of listening to his father's story, he came to him in person in a social setting where they kind of run into each other And he said, I had no idea. And I just want to tell you, like, that really changed me and impacted me. I think that doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. That happens
Right.
to other people.
Yeah, right.
That happens elsewhere. And to hear that story specifically and that level of detail and those emotions and then to know that I know you. Like,
Yeah.
I know you in real life, and I had I would never have guessed that kind of thing happened to
Yep.
you. And it changed his opinion of.
And I do find that interesting, the impact from someone that actually knows us to the impact that someone that someone is far removed. So we have had people that have messaged us that are far removed. We've had no contact.
They don't
with these
know
people.
you. You're not
Nothing.
friends, right?
Yeah, and they say whatever they have to say in a message. Hey, it's really awesome what you're doing.
Right.
These stories
Right.
are great, and it opens our eyes to this and that. But then to have the people that knew us prior to and are now hearing these things,
Right.
Yeah,
it's
I
a
had no
whole
idea.
nother perspective. It's I don't want to say that not in a negative way. They just seem to carry themselves around us maybe a little differely.
Yeah, there's
Is
a
that
level
there?
of awareness.
Yeah, awareness.
Of
Maybe that's what it is.
Not being so flippant about, like, when we say, support law enforcement, support the military, veterans issues, our stance on standing for the
We're giving it a backbone,
flag.
basically.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, like, when you say this is important to you, I mean, there's a reason why, and it's not a joke.
Does knowing that the people that you know are listening to what you're saying and the interviews that you're doing, and you're sharing yourselves and maybe sharing stories that are very personal to you, does that make it harder for you to then be transparent as you're having those interviews and telling those stories? Because I know for me, I've written a little bit and do the show and speak. I believe in the power of transparency. I believe you need to tell those stories. But every time I get right to the line of doing it, there's always somebody that comes up in my mind. What are they going to think about this? If somebody doesn't know this, or whatever. It doesn't mean you don't do it, but does it make it harder for you?
I don't
Having
think
had those conversations with friends that are like, oh, I had no idea.
I don't think that'll ever go away. I
Yeah.
think it becomes easier over time. And we haven't gotten into too much about my background, but I really didn't learn about transparency until I came to this program.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it went full swing for me.
Right, because you've been through the Mighty Oaks program.
Right. So yeah, I think the transparency thing, and then always thinking in the back of your mind, like, maybe not.
Yeah. What are they going to think about me?
Yeah, I think that'll always be there, but I think
Yeah.
maybe over time it is. I mean, at least for me, it's gotten easier.
And you just push through it and go,
Yeah.
well, they need to hear this.
Not
or
every
they need to be
time,
exposed to
but
it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's times where you back off and you realize it's probably.
Yeah.
But there's other times where you push through. There's times where I've said something on mic, knowing, that somebody specific could be hearing it. And at one point, it was my father. I said, "Dad, if you listen to this, I'm sorry, but it was talking about something that happened at a Thanksgiving where I thought, if something went sideways, I'd probably have to take my dad out first because he's the most dangerous. Besides me, he's the most dangerous man in the room."
Yeah.
And I was talking about it in context of
That would make me proud
invasive
of myself.
stuff.
To me, that
Right.
I wouldn't feel bad about
Yeah,
that.
right. And he probably goes, "Yeah, I am the most dangerous man in the room, son."
But you're not taking me out.
That's right. You think so? He used to tell me, "Age and treachery will always beat youth and skill." But no, I mean, we were talking about it in context of thoughts you can't stop sometimes, and then you have them. They go through your mind, and then you feel guilty about having them, and then you think, "I'm a horrible person."
Yeah.
But I think you in the other episode we talked about experiencing the same thing, where somebody will finally raise their hand and go, "Does anybody else think this?"
You just have these thoughts? Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, every day.
Oh yeah.
I'm having it right now.
Right. So I think, okay, so when we started, and we used to use nicknames, and that was a throwback to the old original
When you say
podcast.
we used to, you mean last episode.
I mean last episode. There will be a couple episodes that air after this comes out that we were still using nicknames because we put a couple in the can so we can live our regular lives and still spend time with our family.
Yeah.
We were using nicknames, and it was a holdover from the old show where we figured, okay, if we all use nicknames, then you can be honest and open about your opinions and thoughts.
Yeah.
And then when we got to this, we carried it over for a couple of reasons. One, it gives us the opportunity to be completely honest.
Yeah.
And two, some of our guests are still in the military or still in law enforcement or still on the fire department. And so we would tell them, how much of a level of anonymity do you want? But I mean, over the course of time, we've decided, we got to, if we're going to be honest, let's just be completely honest,
Yeah.
and that includes our real names.
Sure.
If other people, for their own operational or security or safety
Yeah,
reasons,
of course.
want to maintain their anonymity, that's fine.
Of course.
But we have to have, the courage of our convictions and say, yeah, this is me, and this is what I think.
who we
and this is
really
what I
are.
say. And
Right.
that will hopefully give the people that are coming on the show the confidence that we have the integrity to stand by
What we say.
what we say.
Yeah.
So speaking of people who are still serving, John,
Yeah.
you're still serving.
I still am serving.
Nice segue.
Yeah, I like it when that
I
happens.
got to say segue before I did.
impressed. Oh.
I like that.
Well, you
word.
teed it up for me, so I just had to hit it. Tell us your story. So your dad is a police officer as well.
My dad and my mom.
Your dad and your mom.
Yeah. Combined, they're at, 55 years of public service, if not more. They're both retired.
You didn't have a choice.
Almost didn't have a choice. Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
So I kind of knew from basically my first memory of seeing my dad in uniform, I was like, that is what I'm doing,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
So growing up, I knew I wanted to go to the military. Kind of tossed around the Army, tossed around the Navy, and
Marines weren't on your list?
Marines were not on my list.
Interesting.
I'm sorry.
Second place is okay with you, I guess.
I guess it is.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's fine.
But either way, I knew I was going to the military at some point.
It's that camaraderie we talked about.
So what's funny is I was right before high school. I had joined, I guess, the Navy's version of like maybe it's like an ROTC program.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I knew I was like, well, Navy's not for me. I'm not down with the water stuff. So Army it is. And for some reason, the 101st always like stuck out in my brain. And I was like, that's where I want to end up one day.
It's a cool patch.
Huh?
It's a cool patch.
Cool patch.
Yeah.
And
Long history.
Yeah.
yeah, very long history.
Yeah.
So
They're still in the Army, unfortunately. But they do have a long history.
They do have a long
They've done some important things.
And graduated high school, and I kind of had a choice to make, and that was either do I go to college or do I go to the military? And that's just kind of where I was in life. And
sure.
I knew I wanted to be a police officer, but I had to wait till I was 20 and a half to even apply.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? Military it is.
Yeah.
So at the time, this was at the end of 2007. So war was going pretty hard.
Yeah.
And they were offering signing bonuses for any combat MOS in the Army.
That was a period of time. That was at the Plus Up and
they were pushing.
Yeah, right.
They were pushing hard.
Right.
And so I was like, you know what? I wanted a combat job anyway.
Yeah.
What do I get for going to the infantry? Like 20,000. Perfect. No problem.
Yeah. Sure.
Here, I'll sign here. So
how hard could it be?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well, you better to get it over with and know you're going.
Yeah.
yeah. So I knew I was going,
Sure.
and I was okay with that. And at the end of my basic training and infantry training, I'll never forget it. They said my last name in 101st Airborne, and I was like,
Wow.
that is crazy.
Yeah, wow.
That is crazy. Because there was only, I think, maybe 10 or 15 of us
That's awesome.
that went there.
Yeah.
So
By the way, you have to tell him, and I don't know if this episode hasn't aired. It was yours most recent one. His father, 25 years with LAPD at the time, finds out he's going, and did everything within his power to go with him.
Is that right?
Yes.
tried.
Tried.
He tried.
No kidding.
Yeah.
He tried to take a leave of absence from the Los Angeles Police Department and go with him, just because he wanted to fight alongside his boy. And
So weird caveat on that. Side story. When I was in Iraq, we were in Kuwait. We pushed north. The reserve unit that we served with, there was a reserve infantry unit there, was 23rd Marines, and all those guys were LAPD officers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
it was the unit that was based in Los Angeles. I think 70% of that battalion was LAPD officers.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
so,
really
yeah, pretty interesting. Yeah,
That's
kind of side story.
So I was assigned to 2506 Infantry Regiment out of 101st Airborne,
Wow.
which is Currahee. So if anyone's seen Band of Brothers, I was with Charlie Company.
No kidding.
You missed it by 2 companies.
Huh?
Missed Easy Company.
Easy by 2 companies, I know. But
that's really cool.
so
Yeah.
even more history with
Sure.
that. But anyways, so got to my unit, and they said, hey, hope you're ready to deploy because we're leaving in about 30 days. I'm like, great. I know everything about what's to do with an air assault unit.
Sure, sure.
I can get out of it.
Who
Helicopters.
needs training? Yeah.
It's overrated.
So
Yeah.
I learned how to air assault in country, which
No
was
kidding.
pretty cool.
No kidding.
On the job training. Awesome.
Wow. Wow.
Had my so I did my 13-month deployment. We were in Afghanistan, And had its good times, had its bad times.
13 months, man. That's incredible.
Long time. It was a long
The
time.
Army does those long deployments, yeah.
Well, I had a 2-week break.
And that's good. And it was right in the middle, wasn't it?
No, because I was the new guy, it was right in the beginning. So we got there, they're like, hey, you're going to take your 2 weeks, come on back.
I think the cruelest thing the military does is they let someone go for 6 months and they give them two weeks off.
Yeah.
You can go home for 2 weeks. First of all, it's going to take you 3 days to get home.
Yeah.
It will take you 3 days to get back here.
Yeah.
Right.
But you'll have 5 days at home.
Yep,
So it'll be fine.
It'll be cool.
And then you'll come back to war.
Right.
It's kind of like when you're a cop and you get 2 days off to relax.
Right.
Before you have to go back.
Right. Same
There's
thing.
no relaxing. The first day is winding down. The second day is jacking yourself back up to
Right.
go to work. Yeah.
Wow.
So without getting into too much detail, there was a series of events that happened overseas that kind of led me to a path that ended up with me going to this program.
On an upcoming episode.
Right. And I did share that story eventually.
Very cool.
So deployment happens, I get home, and at this time they had stopped stop loss, and stop loss is when they were keeping people in the military, even when their ETS date was coming up. So they had stopped it, and they said, hey, your next deployment is coming up on your ETS date. Do you want to re-up for 3 more years? And I'm like, well, can I just extend for the deployment? Because by this time I'm a team leader. I don't want to not go with my guys, and we're going back to the same place.
But you don't want to stay in for...
Right, but I knew what I wanted to do outside of the military.
Right.
So rough decision, but I made it and I got out. So they let me out actually almost a year early with an honorable because I didn't want to stay an extra 3. So
That's interesting.
that was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, I bet.
But I did it. Got out of the military and immediately started applying to police departments. I got picked up by Los Angeles School Police. Pretty quickly.
So explain that real quick, because you explained it to me earlier, and I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that the LA Unified School District has its own police department.
Right.
And they've got, there's pretty much 2 halves to this. There's a resource officer, which is actually on the school campuses, and then there's a patrol section to this with detectives and K9 and motors and
That's just insane to me to even think about that. Yeah.
And it's bigger than a lot of municipal police departments. It is 3 times. You guys are down here in Southern California. I don't know if you say what city you're in.
Yeah, we're in Murrieta.
So in Murrieta, you have what? You said 101?
Like 100, yeah, something.
And the school police department is over 300 sworn.
I think now we're probably, now they are, I'm not with them anymore, but now they're close to I think they're close to 5 by now.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
But how many people are in the school district? Students?
Thousands.
More than most cities, right?
Yeah, it's huge.
And is that this has nothing to do with anything we're talking about, but is that governed by, or who's the administration for that?
School district,
the school district?
So there is a chief of police, but the superintendent runs the show.
So you're not part of the LAPD, or they're not part of the LAPD?
No, it's its own police department.
Incredible.
It's just like just its own, your own city had a municipality. It's the same thing.
Superintendent is the
Head
mayor of that city.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Was with that department for close to 6 years before I was involved in a shooting with that department, and then a lot of things started going a little downhill for me.
Yeah.
A lot of things that I had not taken care of prior to from deployment started coming back, and it was bad news from then. I had met. And at that point in my life, I had realized I needed to reach out for help because I was not doing too good.
Right.
So I did. I was put in touch with a family friend, and come to find out,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Matt.
Yeah, Matt. Yeah. So I was put in touch with Matt, and Matt told me about Mighty Oaks and what they do, and basically was like, hey, dude, you need to do something. And so I did.
Yeah.
And I went through the program. Yeah. And it changed. It's pretty crazy how a few days can change your whole perspective on life.
It is crazy. It's just
wild.
A few days.
It's wild. It's just a few days.
Right.
And surprisingly, it took a lot of courage for me to go. I was actually surprised I went, but I did it. I bit the bullet and I did it.
Right.
But I knew I needed to do it.
It's amazing. You had none of those compulsions about going to Afghanistan.
Yeah, no.
We're going to a retreat.
So what made it, why do you say that it required a lot of courage? Just to know you were going to have to deal with whatever you're dealing with.
It was everything that I knew I had to face at some point in my life was finally coming to fruition.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. And I'll never forget the day. I was on my way to work, and I was pulling into the station, and I started crying for no reason.
Yeah.
And like I could not stop. It was hysterical.
Yeah.
And right then
it was hysterical.
I was hysterically crying.
Oh, okay.
Not hysterical. Well, actually, it was hysterical.
Looking back.
Were you laughing at yourself?
No, hysterically crying. And that's at that point. That's when I was like, I'm past the point.
Something's
of anything.
Got to change.
Like, yeah, I have to do something because it's now affecting my entire. And I knew it was affecting my life, but I didn't really know how.
How many people? I don't know if this is a rhetorical question or not. Maybe there's not an answer, but how many people transition out of the military and they jump into something else right away and never do deal with military stuff?
A lot.
And so when they finally get to that point, like you, what you were dealing with happened, years prior,
right?
Or
yeah,
whatever.
08, 09, and now fast forward to 2017. Yeah. And it took one thing for it to kind of kick off again.
Right.
But it kind of resurfaced everything that I had tucked away.
We talk about resiliency a lot, and for us, resiliency is trying to get out in front of some of these problems and trying to make decisions ahead of time before, the deployment or the shooting or the whatever, so that you don't have to deal with that. But dealing with these things early is key. But so often we don't do that.
Right. And
we wait until we can't do anything else.
And looking back on it now, I feel like I knew I wanted to be a police officer, period.
Right.
But that was a solution for an issue that was going on because I was still able to keep my mind occupied.
Right.
In a way where I was still getting to do something I love to do.
Yep.
I was still in a how do you call it? I don't know, paramilitaristic type of way.
Sure.
You're in uniform.
So it was just keeping everything at a lower level. It was just kind of keeping everything buried.
Right.
And then, obviously things happened, and then it wasn't buried anymore.
Right.
I came to the program, and then just to wrap it up, he already had mentioned about how we got to the podcast and how we met and all that stuff. I ended up lateraling to another police department that fit me and my lifestyle and my family just better. Yeah. And that's where I'm at now.
What was it about the Mighty Oaks program? We talk about the Mighty Oaks program on this show a lot because, it's our program and we get to do that. But we try to describe to people, this is why it works, this is how it works, and this is why in a couple of days people are able to make a change. If you don't mind, can you talk about your experience there a little bit, and maybe just some of the things, some of your takeaways? I don't know what that would be for you. It's probably different for everyone. But
sure. I know we had brought it up earlier, and that was the whole transparency thing.
Yeah.
I seriously did not know the meaning of transparency until I went through this program.
Right.
And I value that word a lot now, just because of the things that we get to do on our podcast.
Yep.
And I think that's something that I'll always have to work on.
Yeah.
But I'm able to be transparent now with people.
Right. What does that mean, transparent?
Like, I feel like now people so prior to it, I feel like people saw me, but they kind of knew it wasn't me. Right. If that makes it's really hard. Sure. In my brain, it's hard.
They're meeting your representative.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're meeting your PR person
all
the time because you put on a face, but it's not you.
And it's easy when you're wearing a uniform too, right?
Well,
Very
they
easy.
teach you that you have to do it.
Yeah,
Very easy.
I tell the story often. When I was going through the basic officer course, I was getting ready to go to infantry officer course, be an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. Our staff platoon commander said, pull all the infantry guys aside. There's like 5 of us. And said, I want you to understand something. When you get out to the fleet, you need to wear a mask all the time. Don't let anyone ever see what's behind that mask. If you hurt physically, no one should know about it.
Right.
If you hurt, in some other way, I don't think he said emotionally, but
suck it up.
Whatever's going on, you're a leader. You don't get to show that.
Right.
I mean, that almost destroyed me as a human being.
Sure.
Right.
And for the people that don't experience the things we experienced in the military, that it's hard for them to build relationships with you that way. Guaranteed, my wife would not be with me right now if I had continued to be down this same path.
Sure.
I wouldn't have an awesome baby girl, or none of that stuff would be happening.
Yeah.
If I didn't learn how to be transparent with people, at least to some degree.
Yeah.
So that was a takeaway. Also knowing, and again, we had talked about this in the podcast previous, knowing that you're not alone. I always knew I wasn't alone in my feelings, but no matter how many times I told myself I wasn't alone, I was alone.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
I would literally feel like no one was in this world.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
And I never attempted suicide, but I definitely did have thoughts of why am I here, and there's no reason for me to be here. And I think that came with being in such a lonely place.
Yeah.
So seeing these people, men and women, going through the same things that I'm going through, it gives me something to actually reference in my brain. I'm like, okay, this is happening in front of me. I'm seeing it. I'm believing it. These people are real,
yes.
rather than just kind of living to myself.
Right.
In my own world.
How does knowing you're not alone help you with other people? Your wife, your family? So let me back up. When I convince myself that I'm alone in the way that I feel, it causes me to kind of become alone because I shut everybody else out.
Yeah, absolutely. Shut down. Yeah.
But once you realize I'm not the only one that's ever experienced this, for me at least, it changes my relationship with a lot of people.
I think, so one of the things we've gotten through doing this show, or our show, I should say, is, you were talking about a couple of days can change people. We've literally watched somebody tell a story, and just through the course of the hour of recording the episode and having 3 people there who can say, did you feel this? Because I did when this happened to me. Or they'll tell something that's part of their story, and it strikes something in me. So that commonality, those little moments, just in that hour, it kind of bolsters you. It's like, we always say we have to be better about meeting people that you've helped, because then you'll feel like you actually did something,
sure.
right? So this is the same kind of thing. It's meeting somebody that shared that same experience just for an hour.
Yeah.
Bolsters you and buoys you and takes you to the next time and reminds you you're not alone, because that's the hardest part, is thinking that you're going through this in a vacuum, and then what do I do?
And it helps to take your eyes off yourself, right?
Yes.
So when you're pulled out of that hole,
right.
now you can look at other people and go, it's okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I was literally about to say that in different words.
Well,
it goes back to
my
what
words were probably better.
Probably.
I don't know.
Probably.
I don't know that for a fact. But
it's the part of the we are at our best when we're serving, especially because if you got into this line of work to begin with, right? Nobody that I can think of right now that is experiencing issues, whether it's police officers, firefighters, or military veterans, nobody was drafted.
Right.
Everybody signed up for it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody got into this. Well, not nobody, but I'm sure very few people got into this for any other reasons other than some pretty altruistic, service-oriented reasons.
Sure.
Maybe there's a couple of people that got into it for a free Dodge Charger, but whatever.
Yeah.
So that's part of our nature. Colonel Grossman writes the analogy of the sheepdog.
Yeah.
We're a small percentage of the population. So when you take people like us and you put us in a situation where we can do something, we feel fulfilled. We feel like we have a purpose.
Yep.
And then when you take us out of that, there's a despair that sets in, because that's part of our nature. That's why we signed up in the first place, is to fulfill that duty, to fulfill that need. So if you take that fulfillment away, it leaves a hole.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people, unfortunately, fill up that hole with the exact wrong stuff.
Yeah. And the wrong stuff can look like the right stuff. It can be work. It can be police work.
Yeah.
That's exactly
it can be really important stuff.
You won't know it's the wrong stuff
exactly
until
what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So transparency, understanding you're not alone, you have a connection point. What are some other things connected to you?
One other, probably the biggest thing was I was raised, I come from a Jewish family. Okay, I gotta backtrack now because I said my mom. I referenced my mom, and she's been a couple. She's actually my stepmom. I consider her my mother.
Yeah, sure.
She raised me ever since I was little.
Yeah.
So when my father and my real mother divorced, my dad married my stepmom. My dad converted to Christianity. I think I was about 17 years old, and religion was never pushed on me.
Yeah.
So I kind of always was free to kind of just look and kind of dabble in whatever I wanted to dabble in. And long story short, I was curious, so I started going to church with my dad and my mom, and I converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
And that's when I was about 17 and a half years old, 17, 18.
Kind of right before the military.
Yeah, right before.
Else going on. Right.
It's a good time to do it.
Right. And going back to the series of events that took place over a 13-month deployment, I had lost touch with my faith, period, over. Like, there was no question in my brain.
Yep.
And then I had one incident take place at the end that kind of put me in check. Like, hey, now I'm still around, dude. Now, fast forward to 2017. In between that time, again, I was still going downhill, but without even realizing it.
Right.
And was losing. I was losing faith, and I was losing. I just wasn't in touch with it. It wasn't part of really who I was.
Yeah. And not even realizing it.
And not even realizing it.
It just slips away.
Yeah.
And so going through this program, number one, opened my eyes. Number two, it put me back in reality. And number three, it was very easy for me to then understand faith and how it applies to life. And that's been huge. And getting through everything else I needed to get through.
Yeah.
Right.
So can you talk about that for a minute? Faith and how it applies to life, the importance of faith and moving forward, and your perspective on life.
Sure. Oh, I've never been asked that question. Man, it's putting me on the spot.
Big stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
And even speaking broadly, I mean, faith is a big conversation. It's a big topic, and it has some specific implications. But broadly, coming to that place.
I feel like it's made me more calm in life in general.
Yeah. In
my marriage.
Yeah.
In having a child, even though I have my bad days.
Sure.
I feel like it's always something that I can resort to that's going to keep me level-headed and remind me where I need to be in life.
Is that a control issue? Faith says I don't have to be in control of my wife and my kid and my life and my stuff because I have faith in someone bigger than me and someone outside of me. And that does provide a peace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That this is meant to be because it's meant to be.
Sure.
And
There's something bigger than yourself.
I don't have to control this.
There's something bigger than yourself, and there's something that's consistent and there and applies to everything and anything.
Right.
No matter what, there is a rock that you can base your foundation on. Whatever your faith is not Christianity, but if you don't have a faith, then where's your consistency in life? Where's your stability?
And fear and anxiety, they come from a lack of control. I mean, I'm afraid for my wife. I'm afraid for my kids. I'm afraid for my finances because I can't control how this is all going to turn out. But when I turn that to faith, and I'm my confidence is now in God, who can handle these things. It does bring peace.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And again, we're all human, so we have our bad days.
We have our moments, right? Yeah, for sure.
That's right.
But if it always resorts back to that, it keeps me level-headed.
Yeah. How did and I don't know what your relationship with your wife was before going to the program.
We weren't married before, and we weren't even in a dating relationship.
Is that right? You knew her, though.
I did know her, but
she wanted nothing to do with you.
Yeah, probably. In passing.
Yeah.
It was all in passing.
Right.
But, when I said earlier I wouldn't have the wife that I have and she wouldn't have dealt with some of the things that she's had to deal with is, I feel like everything up into us dating and then getting married and having a child, it prepared me for it.
Right.
Rather than her actually being there during that moment.
Yes. How'd your family respond to you when you came back from the program? The people that you were close to, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So having parents in law enforcement, it's not very lovey-dovey.
Sure.
And
not a super nurturing environment.
No. Yeah. Not a lot of coddling going on.
You good now? All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So, my parents were supportive in their own way. And, they wanted to know about it. We spoke about it.
Yeah.
And I could tell that they were proud of me for doing it. And I would even say their attitude towards me changed.
Yeah.
Because even though I was going through things, I wasn't very vocal about what I was going through. And me being their son, they're like, oh, he's just being a, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the way they treated me was different, I would say, pretty much immediately right after.
Right.
Yeah. And different in a way of like I'm taking the steps to fix myself, and we need to respect that.
Yeah. They were just proud of you for doing what you needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. So has that experience, and this is for both of your experiences with faith and with maybe looking at the world kind of through that lens more, has that changed your conversations on your show? Has it changed your perspective on your show?
So something we were talking about on the way down here, we both have different stories about the critical incidents we were involved in, but the common thread in both of them that we talked about was a sense of divine intervention. And it's interesting because when we met, I didn't know anything about his background or his faith. He didn't know anything about my background or my faith. We never even talked about it. And then I think we launched this show. We still had never even talked about it. And it was only through doing the show that you hear people say keywords and phrases that let you know they're have a faith outside of themselves. And so then we talked about it. Yeah. And it was interesting because I had been raised that way, and obviously you came to it later in life. I kind of took it for granted, and I let it slip away because it's always there. It's always been there. It'll always be there. But then
you mean faith?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't have to pay attention to it. I don't have to nurture it. I was raised that way. I know it's there, and I can but it's just as bad as not having it.
Sure.
As ignoring it.
Yeah, of course.
So
there is no value
in
neglected faith.
So now when we talk about both our own incidents, but also when we have people on, we'll start to look for, key phrases or things in their stories that show that there's a sense of there's something more going on. Yeah. There's something, you were where you were supposed to be when you were supposed to be there, or you knew the right things to do and you were the right person for the job, or we've had firefighters that have survived crazy stuff only to go on to do things they shouldn't have survived. So it's kind of, I think, affected it in that way. It doesn't necessarily affect the show from the perspective of it's not something we constantly talk about, but it lets us know where we're at, and then we can draw those things out of our guests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
do you steer the conversations to a point? Are you trying to make a point, or allowing your guests to tell their story and I guess come to their own conclusions, or people will draw from that what they desire?
I think a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
We definitely let them go wherever they need to go with their story. We don't try to guide that in any type of way. But I would say that we put a pretty strong emphasis in the part about not being alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always want to make sure that everybody knows that they're not alone.
And that's the power of telling stories.
Right.
So you're not alone.
And
here's what we want you to know.
Yeah.
You're not alone.
And we say, like, in public safety, veterans, military, police, firefighters, that's why we have it all, is because even so for example in the military, we just talked about this on the other things, the Marines are Marines first, but then they're veterans. So when they get around other veterans, they give each other crap. But if somebody else tries to be derogatory. Yeah. So we may not all be on the same team. We always say not the same team, all the same side. Right? We're all fighting for the side of good. We're all fighting for service. So whether you're a police officer, firefighter, nurse in the ER, Marine, on an MRAP out in 120-degree weather, whatever you are, you're serving. Right? Yeah. We're all on the same side. We're on the side of good. Yeah. So we may not be on the same team, but we're all on the same side. Yeah. And that concept is something we try to hammer home, is that we give each other crap. You see, people say that, they hear us at the table, they're like, oh man, I can't believe you guys say that to each other. Yeah. And but that's part of what makes us friends. Yeah. It's part of what lets us know we're part of that community. And when other people hear that, the guys that did serve, the guys that were cops, firefighters, they hear that,
they get it.
They totally get it. Right. So I think that maybe is the way we steer the conversation to get to the idea that we all have these shared experiences, regardless of the uniform we put on. Yeah. We all have these shared experiences, and it's these shared experiences that have brought us to this place. Yeah. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't share it with each other and be honest about it, then we're not doing ourselves any good, because we can't be helping people if we can't help ourselves. Sure.
Yeah. This is kind of wrapping back to something that was said early on, but it's on kind of top of mind right now, is police officer suicide. Mm-hmm. man, this is a big conversation that we won't dive into, but I feel like a show like yours is really important as it relates to things like police officer suicide, because people who aren't police officers, who live in communities, can hear those stories from police officers, and it makes them human, and in turn causes the police in that community to feel support. The community that we live in here, Murrieta, is a great community. I mean, there are always people who don't like police, I guess, but, but generally speaking, we have a great relationship with our police department as a community, and community events, and even our social media feeds from the police department, and the way people interact here is awesome, and I think that encourages the police officers, and there's longevity in our department. But you look at places like, right now in New York City, the suicide of police officers is at all-time highs. I think a lot of that has to do with just public perception and support from the officials in those communities. And shows like yours can communicate, hopefully, to those people. Well, you know what police officers really are.
How deep you want to get with
so
this?
we could come down and do a whole other episode on that.
I mean, this is something I've been thinking about, and hearing you guys talk makes me think, man, it's so important that people understand.
It is very important. And to be honest with you, and him and I have worked for two different police departments, but yet we have shared very similar
identical
situations. It's crazy. So it's an epidemic. It's not just the East Coast, not just the West Coast.
Sure.
It's East to West and everything in between.
Right.
And it has to, I believe, it has a lot to do with support coming from the internal department itself.
Yes.
From the command staff. That's where it comes from.
There's a lot of things they can do to fix it, and they don't.
No. And you know what? I don't mind. I don't work for them anymore. There's been times.
I wasn't trying to push you off a cliff here.
No, because it does need to be addressed, and I think it's ridiculous it's not.
Right.
Because of the experience I have experienced in my life, I put myself out there for the department when the shooting that took place in Vegas, when the guy was shooting from the hotel. Anyways, we had a lot of officers that were there. A lot of officers that were almost killed, and were helping people that were dead and wounded, and a lot of them were not okay, and they needed help. And I was like, hey, look, this is my time right now. Like I can relate to these people. Put me in. Like I need
put me in, coach.
Right. They need to know that, number one, they're not alone, and number two, if they got to talk, I can understand what they went through. I can. No problem. We'll get to you. Okay, well, what are you going to do for them? What are you going to do for them?
Crickets.
Well, we don't know yet. Come to find out, they sent them, I think, on a weekend to some beach city, and they sat down with a counselor for a few hours, and that was it.
Sounds about right.
And I was like, I cannot believe this is the place I work for.
Right.
And that's just one example. I can go all day. And I think it's disgusting. I really do.
And firefighters, the statistics on firefighters are even higher than police officers. And
I mean, last year there were, I think the number is slightly higher, suicides over line of duty deaths for firefighters, but 30% underreporting. So, most people believe that it's probably double the number of line of duty deaths as suicides.
Sure.
And the police community is just as bad.
Right.
But, what is the cause of that? And I think, for us, we talk about veterans a lot. For you guys, talking more veterans as well, but the law enforcement community and the first responder community is so important as a tool to hopefully change some of the perceptions of those things.
I hope so. I mean, I really hope so. It's really officers that, again, going back to that feeling alone and then looking for help, and then either A, they look for help and can't find it, or two, they get the help, and then guess what? Now you're kicked to the curb because you can no longer be a part of this.
Okay, thank you.
You're a risk.
Go get your help and bye. Cut you loose.
And so we talked about this, and I believe this is true, that it is our communities that need to help each other.
Correct.
Because the establishment, whatever that is, the VA is not the devil, although it's talked about as though it's the devil. It's not. The United States has dumped so much money into the Veterans Administration, and everyone has tried and continues to try, and there's some terrible people at the VA, and there's some people who don't want to help at the VA. I get it. But there are a lot of really good people there as well. And in these other clinical settings, working with police and fire and others. But again and again and again, they fall short because it is a very clinical approach to these issues, and maybe a medical approach to these issues, or medicine. but we can support each other.
Yes.
Right.
And that's the answer.
Yes.
Right.
And where help is found is when, those of us who have done it
Yes.
are walking alongside other
Yes.
people.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. We could talk a lot more, but that's a good place to probably end. But I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
What you guys are doing, and continue to do it.
We have we brought you something.
I like it when people bring gifts.
Right.
Gifts are awesome.
So we're doing a fund. Speaking
For
of
all
police
future
suicides,
future folks on our show, bring gifts.
speaking of police suicides, we're doing a fundraiser for the Wounded Blue Foundation.
Yeah.
Which is actually a foundation that's helping officers who can't get help from their own department to get help with peer counseling from the Wounded Blue Foundation. And they can do it anonymously, get peer counseling, get financial assistance, get all kinds of things they need to make sure that they don't lose their career and they do get the help they need at the same time.
Wounded Blue Foundation. Where do they find out information?
Woundedblue.org. You can find them on social media, woundedblue.org, the Wounded Blue Foundation. There's a documentary on Amazon. You can go download it. It's called The Wounded Blue, and it's about police suffering from traumatic injuries or traumatic events and not getting help they need.
Yeah.
So we decided, because they're a new organization, we wanted to, for our first fundraiser, we're going to help them as much as we can. So we did a T-shirt and a challenge coin.
Nice.
Okay, so we brought you a T-shirt.
Well, thank you.
And we brought you a
War Stories
coin.
podcast.
Yeah. Coin. So we are doing.
Look at that. There it is. You can see it.
So it's basically the challenge coin image on the shirt.
Very cool.
And then we're doing the challenge coin. Now this is a special one. We are doing two styles. We do the one that
awesome.
that you can pre-order, but then this is the special one for people that we meet in person.
Very cool.
I
appreciate it.
So it represents all of the first responder community:
Yeah.
police, fire, military, all that stuff.
Well, thank you so much.
We are all the same side.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I want to continue to support you guys. Appreciate it. And really, we do believe that it's us that needs to take care of us.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing that. And appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
for the conversations. Both of them. Long conversations.
Yeah, thank you for yours.
Yeah, we'll do it again. But go and find these guys. Again, where can people find you and find your show and find your merchandise and everything else?
The podcast I can find anywhere: Stitcher, Google Play, Google Podcast, Apple, iTunes, all that kind of stuff. It's all over the place.
War Stories Official.
War Story Official.
Instagram, on Facebook.
And he knows all of our stuff about. I'm supposed to say it's mailbag.warstories@gmail.com because he can't remember the email address.
Nope, but I can remember Facebook and Instagram.
So you can follow us there. We'll post videos, just thoughts. We've done things where people ask us questions. One gal, asked, "Hey, how do I get through law enforcement training?" And so I just posted a little 30-second video. Of, here's what you need to do to get through the academy. We'll do that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. For those of you that are watching, again, if you haven't subscribed yet, you need to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified of when new episodes come online. For those of you that are listening in other places, and there are a lot of different places you can listen. I had somebody the other day tell me they heard a show, and they found it somewhere I didn't even know we were on that platform. So it was awesome. So it was cool. But wherever you're listening, if you have yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please do that. And we will talk to you next time. Thank you.